Breaking news. Supreme Court halts Trump's $1 trillion tariff. The headline flashed across every screen in America. In Times Square, crowds stopped mid-stride, eyes fixed on the news tickers. In Midwest diners, conversations fell silent as farmers stared at TV screens. The news was monumental, a turning point that would touch every American. The Supreme Court was about to rule on the most aggressive trade policy in modern history. The America First tariff, imposed by former President Trump, taxed nearly all imports. Prices soared, businesses struggled, and the nation waited for the justice's decision. In Detroit and Pittsburgh, factory workers who once supported the tariff now felt uncertain as inflation ate away at their paychecks. In rural Iowa, farmers faced financial ruin as exports plummeted due to retaliatory tariffs. The Supreme Court's decision was a lifeline. The announcement came just after 10 a.m. Eastern. News alerts buzzed on millions of phones. Trading floors erupted into a frenzy. For months, markets had been on a roller coaster, awaiting this final word. For families, the news brought cautious hope after months of struggle. The daily fight to make ends meet had become unbearable. This ruling felt like the first glimmer of light after a long, dark storm. America exhaled, waiting to see what would come next. The nation's fate now rested with the Supreme Court. The $1 trillion tariff was unprecedented. It was a blanket tax on nearly everything America imported. Announced with bold promises to revive manufacturing and bring back jobs, it quickly upended the economy. At ports, cargo ships waited offshore as importers scrambled to adapt. Prices for steel, semiconductors, and everyday goods soared overnight. Small businesses were hit hardest. Bicycle shops, restaurants, and retailers saw costs double. The tariff became a wrecking ball, not just a line item. Opposition was fierce. Businesses, consumer groups, and economists warned it was a tax on Americans, not foreign countries. Protests erupted. Farmers and factory workers joined forces against the policy. Retaliatory tariffs devastated American exports. Soybean farmers and tech companies lost key markets. Even manufacturers suffered, trapped by rising costs for imported parts. The policy, meant to build walls, ended up caging American businesses. The economic pain transcended politics, uniting unlikely allies. The fallout was swift and severe. The tariff's promise of prosperity turned into widespread hardship. The nation was left reeling, desperate for relief. The Supreme Court's intervention became the last hope. America waited for a way out. For families, the tariff was a daily burden. Grocery prices climbed, bananas, coffee, avocados became luxuries. Parents faced tough choices: fresh vegetables or cheaper canned goods, new shoes or making do. Retailers struggled as clothing and electronics became unaffordable. Main Street shops closed, leaving empty storefronts as scars. In manufacturing, initial surges in orders faded as costs for materials soared. Promised job growth vanished. Workers faced longer hours for the same pay. The tech sector stalled. Startups paused, investors pulled back. The tariff stifled innovation and mortgaged the future. The economic pressure was relentless, anxiety mounting. The nation paid not just in dollars, but in lost opportunities. Americans waited, hoping for a lifeline. Legal challenges to the tariff began immediately. A coalition of corporations, small businesses, and consumer groups argued the president had overstepped constitutional authority. They claimed only Congress could levy such a sweeping tax. The case centered on the Commerce Clause. Who controls the power of the purse? Lower courts issued conflicting rulings, deepening uncertainty. Businesses were left in limbo, unable to plan for the future. The Supreme Court became the final arbiter. The stakes were enormous, the limits of presidential power and the future of American trade. The nation watched as two visions of government collided: strong executive action versus balanced power. The court's decision would set a precedent for generations. The constitutional drama reached its climax. The country's economic fate and the balance of power hung in the balance. All eyes turned to the Supreme Court. The day of oral arguments was electric. The chamber was packed as lawyers for both sides prepared. The government argued the president needed flexibility to respond to economic threats, citing delegated authority from Congress. The tariff, they insisted, was a tool to protect American workers. The opposition argued the tariff was a massive tax. Only Congress could impose it. They warned of a dangerous precedent, unchecked executive power to tax Americans. Justices pressed both sides, probing the limits of presidential authority. Could the president impose any tax, for any reason? Chief Justice Roberts posed a pivotal question. Could the president ban all imports from a country simply out of personal dislike? The government's hesitation revealed the stakes. The court wasn't just deciding on a tariff, they were defining the future of the presidency. The justices weighed the balance of power, the Constitution, and the nation's future. The fate of the tariff, and much more, hung in the balance. The country waited for the court's verdict. The outcome would shape American governance for decades. The tension was palpable. The decision would soon be known. The decision was decisive. A 6-3 ruling struck down the tariff. The majority affirmed that only Congress can impose such broad taxes. The court drew a firm line. The president's authority does not extend to unilateral, sweeping tariffs. The ruling was a rebuke of executive overreach and a reaffirmation of checks and balances. The decision was about process. Who gets to decide, not just what is decided. Across the country, relief was palpable. Farmers celebrated, hoping to rebuild lost markets. Small businesses looked forward to lowering prices and regaining customers. Families hoped for relief from crushing costs. Social media exploded with reactions. The mood was one of optimism. Financial markets surged, signaling a return to stability. The ruling removed a cloud of uncertainty from the global economy. The business world craved open markets and the rule of law. America breathed easier, ready to move forward. The Supreme Court's decision ended a policy and opened a new chapter. The debate shifted from tariffs to building a smarter trade strategy. Leaders from both parties called for a new approach: protect workers without punishing consumers. Congress began work on modern trade legislation, focusing on negotiation and targeted agreements. The process would be difficult, but it was driven by debate and compromise. Recovery would be gradual. Businesses and jobs wouldn't return overnight. But the decision restored confidence and hope. It reaffirmed America's core principles and the strength of its institutions. The crisis tested the nation, but the rule of law prevailed. The decision marked a new era, one of smarter, fairer trade. The storm had passed. The sky was clearing. America looked ahead, ready to rebuild. The future, once uncertain, now held promise.